Hey everyone, movie for the day is PREMAM. PREMAM, which means love in Malayalam. Love is a magical emotion to feel about, and obviously the movie PREMAM is pure magic. Don't judge me that I am exaggerating stuffs. If you are a guy who believes in love and trust in vibes, then trust me, this movie will definitely satisfy you. Despite the fact that the movie has a very short storyline, every frame in the movie has to cherished and enjoyed in their own way. The story completely moves with a single person, George. The movie begins with George's early teenage while he was pursuing his pre-degree with his friends Koya and Shampu. George met Mary in his church and fell in love with her. Mary, however, managed to impress local teens with her long and curly hair, and George was one among them. While returning home from her school, Mary used to deal with a lot of proposals. But George, on the other side, after facing lot of failure attempts in his proposal, got enough courage to make a phone call to Mary's home. Unfortunately, Mary's father received the call, but however he managed and made him believe that he was his tuition mate and got a chance to talk with Mary, but end up in disappointment as she hung up without any proper response. The very next morning, George with his friends decided to open up his heart to Mary. While George with his friends waited for Mary in the middle of backwater bridge in Alappuzha, and there comes the curly beauty accompanied with a little girl of her neighborhood, Celine, and a guy who is nerdy enough. While George, who was ready to open up his love towards Mary, contradictory scene happens. Mary opens up that the nerdy guy as her boyfriend and asked George help to make phone calls from his home since her dad trusts George as her tuition mate. So now George literally helps his lover to love another guy. Whenever they stepped out for couple day out, Mary spends time with the nerdy guy while George chit-chatted with the little girl Celine. As the days passed, now the next shot is when George was doing his final year of BSc Computer Science. George is no more the guy that we saw in the first half, both externally and internally. This part of his life is gangster-filled part of the movie, starting with a frame where he lights a bomb underneath of a stage with his cigarette. The bomb was to collapse a dance performance by one of his college mates who did not dance with George, Koya and Shampu. A breathtaking fight sequence, and within Kalipu BGM in the background, the scene was an epic one. After 2 months of suspension for the bomb blast, George, Koya, Shampu returned to the college. Coincidentally, it was college opening for first years, and the boys decided to start the day with ragging. As ragging happens, George met Malar and came to know that her name is Malar and she was from Tamil Nadu, and later they realized that she was a teacher and apologized to her. Boys with the suspension and with a liquor bottle are now mass enough to give a heroic entry inside the class. George had a little crush on Malar. Unfortunately, Malar came to his class. The boys were caught for consuming alcohol inside the class and asked to get out. George, instead leaving, called Malar and praised her fairness. Malar, without any emotion, asked Koya Shambu to take George with them. Whenever George get a chance, he never missed to bat an eye on her. Malar, who went noticing all his activities without any reaction as of maintaining a lecturer dignity. When George texted Muller for the first time, there begins a soulful relationship. They started spending time together as both were mutually interested. And the relationship got stronger with dance practice sections. As the boys were in the thought of performing in their last culturals and Muller being a dancer choreographed them. In the meantime, Muller introduced Arivalagan to George, Koya and Shampoo as her cousin. Just cousin and nothing more than that. These days were beautiful of his life. They had a beautiful relationship which cannot be expressed in words, and there comes the vacation and Muller left to Kodaikanal to her hometown. George, who already started missing Muller, waited for the college to reopen. That's when he heard the news that Muller was met with an accident and lost her consciousness. So the boys decided to make their way to Kodaikanal. When George met Muller, who was resting with a bandage in her forehead, Muller was not able to recognize George. That's when a sad BGM rolls off in the back and George stepped out of her home weeping and literally made us weep for no reason. After few days, George was invited to Muller's wedding with Arivu. With a lot of emotions to handle, George faced the situation. There ends a beautiful and untold relationship. Now the next frame is after 4 or 5 years, where George with a grim face running a bakery on his own. All those beard and gangster kind of looks were gone, and a grim face with broad moustache made him more enough to look like a matured man. Beautifully furnished and simple outlook made bakery look spectacular in every frame. However, George managed to stay in touch with Koya and Shampoo, and moreover, director Alphonse Puthren managed to bring most of the character in all 3 sequences of George's travel. On one day, a pretty teen girl recognized George, and that's when George came to know that girl was none other than the little girl with Mary. Yes, she is Celine. There was a good vibe maintained between them. And George offered her a red velvet cake to taste. The reason for specification of this scene is the cinematography and camera angle were outstanding in the specific scene to be mentioned. That's when George made his proposal to marry her and came to know that she was engaged. Oh my god, not again. After a few days, Celine made a visit to George's bakery and said about her cancelled wedding. That the guy who she was meant to marry was a drug addict and was behaving rudely to her at the reception. Yup, there comes the Kalipu BGM again. Boys with a bang trashed the hell out of the guy, and to add up, the guy was none other than the director Alphonse Puthren, who made a cameo. And yes, it's a happy ending. Finally, George with Celine.